Hello, everybody, and welcome to our James Beard Foundation Industry Support webinar on Your Voice Matters Storytelling for Advocacy. My name is Ashley Koziak, and I'm an Impact Program Manager at the James Beard Foundation. And I'm going to take you through a few of the technical points of the webinar before we get into the conversation. So just a few of those items. First, how this webinar works. This webinar is being recorded, and in about 24 hours, so by tomorrow afternoon, you'll be able to access this webinar on our James Beard Foundation Industry Support webinar site. It's easiest to just Google it, James Beard Foundation Industry Support, and you should be able to find these webinars. Like I said, a recording of this will be available there, so you're able to review it, share it, do whatever you want to do. We will save the questions for the end. So the last 10 to 15 minutes will be the time for you to write in your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but we do have a lot of content to talk about. We will get to as many questions as we're able to at the end. If you want to write in a question, we will address them at the end, but you can ask your question at any time throughout the webinar. You do that by using the question function. So if you look at your computer screen on the right side, you'll see a little question icon. It's like a little message box with a question mark in it. You just click on that and you'll be able to ask questions that way. If you run into any technical difficulties, if you can't hear the webinar, my colleague Megan is online as well, and so you can, ask a question. So using that same question function, let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. We will do our best to help troubleshoot it. We're not always successful, and oftentimes the best fix is to log off and then log back on. Just that's the way things are working, and hopefully we won't run into any technical difficulties. So those are the technical points of the webinar. I'm going to briefly introduce our panel and panelist and moderator. So I'll go from left to right, as you can see the folks' photos on the screen here. So Kandia Johnson. Kandia Johnson transformed her life from a learning and communications consultant for a Fortune 500 company to a visibility coach and strategist who spends her days teaching corporate professionals and service-based entrepreneurs how to use their story to get hired and noticed as a leader. Beyond being featured in Forbes, Black Enterprise Magazine, and more, Kandia has delivered presentations on stages throughout the United States and Europe. Janina Lagemann-Doné is Director of Strategy at Giant Spoon, a full-service marketing agency. At Giant Spoon, Janina has led high-complexity brand strategy assignments for a number of clients like Yeti, USA Today, Square, and the James Beard Foundation, among others. Chef Preeti Mistry will be our moderator for today. Chef Preeti has been twice nominated for the James Beard Foundation as Best Chef of the West. They were the co-founder and executive chef of Navi Kitchen and Juhu Beach Club, both closed, as well as the co-author with Sarah Henry of the Juhu Beach Club Cookbook. Preeti has been featured in numerous publications and is currently working on a small organic farm in Sonoma County. Don Padmore is a vice president of culinary marketing and events at award-winning marketing agency Karlitz & Company. Don has helmed many of the agency's biggest culinary productions, including the New York Chocolate Show, Godiva Chocolatier, sponsor activations, Relay and Chanteau, and others. She is a senior producer of the annual Harlem Eat Up Festival and is an active, professional, classically trained soprano, where Don performs both nationally and internationally. And finally, but certainly not last but not least, is Chef Roshara Sanders. Chef Ro is a culinary humanitarian activist. Chef Ro is deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan as a member of the 4th Engineer Battalion. And when Chef Ro returned stateside, she joined the 395th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion and could cross-train as a food supply specialist. You may recognize Chef Ro from multiple Food Network shows, and Chef is a celebrity ambassador for Habitat for Humanity International, and most recently traveled to Malawi on behalf of the organization. In 2018, she also received a coveted Forbes Fellow designation at the 2018 Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit in Boston. So those are our amazing moderator and our panelists, and I'm very happy right now to turn it over to Chef Preeti Mistry. But before I do that, I want to preface that you might not see Janina or Chef Ro on your screen due to the power outages that we've had because of storms. We have some missing power and some tech not connecting. but I want you to know that both Chef Ro and Janina are here. You're just not seeing them on video right now because of that. But now I'm going to hand it over to Chef Preeti.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Ashley. I want to thank, oh, looks like we got Chef Ro for a second here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's hope that she stays. Again, so I'm Preeti, Mistry, and I want to thank the James Beard Foundation, Ashley, Catherine Miller, the whole team for asking me and inviting me to moderate this panel. I spent the last few days reading about these 4 amazing humans and all the stuff that they're doing, and I just feel even more inspired. One of the things that we learned through the Chef Boot Camp is just how important chef voices are, and that's something that I've really been empowered by, whether it's, lobbying in DC or doing things in our own communities, in our own cities. Our voices, we have learned through the boot camp over the years, how important they are and how powerful they are. Right now, in the last 4 months, I'm sure that every single one of a chef or restaurant owner has a gazillion stories about navigating this insane time, whether it's just the constantly changing playing field of what they can do or can't do, keeping their staff safe, thinking about feeding their community, trying to be there for their customers, all of those things. So many stories, I'm sure, and as we say in the industry, never a dull moment. So, and these last 4 months have really gone extra with that never a dull moment. So, I want everyone to know that these stories are going to be the things that impact our future and help us change the world that we're in right now for the better. And all of your stories, all the experiences that you're going through right now are going to impact someone and a lot of people and help bring about new change in the future. So I'm really hopeful for that. We have so many great people here today. I want to start by talking a little bit about my experience in storytelling by telling a story. Some of you may have heard this story before. I'm sorry if you have, but just like my father, I repeat stories. Who's also a very good storyteller. And it was when I was in junior high school, and I was like really nerdy, and I was not cool at all. And there was this kid, Aaron Fisher, that used to make fun of everybody in like first, homeroom. It was like whatever, anyone who wasn't like a white Protestant male, he had something to make fun of them about, so it was like the Jewish kid one day, this girl over there the next day. And one day he turned to me and he said, he called me some Hindu something or other. It wasn't even that good. And I don't know what took over me. It was not premeditated at all. I just lost it. And I walked over there, this nerdy kid, and I just started pushing him and shoving him and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like it kind of came to my senses and I backed up. But I looked at him and I said, if you talk to anyone like that again, I'm going to kick your ass. And I sat back down. And the thing I learned from that is obviously not the violence part. There's different ways to deal with situations. And that's the only fist fight I've ever been in my life. But what I did learn is that he stopped. And what I learned from that is that if we stand up for ourselves and we just say something, because I sat there and I thought to myself, are we all just going to let this kid make fun of everyone in this class every single day? Are we all just collectively going to let this continue to happen? And something inside my little 11-year-old self just popped out. And I like to tell that story because I think it was an awakening for me. And I think people can relate to that as, young kids, the situations we're in and how they shape who we are as adults. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves of those things as adults because sometimes we lose that part of ourselves. So that's a little piece of me. But I really want to get on with the discussion that we're having today with these 4 amazing panelists. So let's kick it off. I want to start with Chef Roshara. I have a question for you, and that is, you have this really varied experience, from being a chef, being a vet, working with Habitat for Humanity. Like, how do you feel that sharing that varied experience through storytelling helps to make an impact in the advocacy that you do?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like storytelling plays a huge part in my success. If I want to get anything out of advocacy, if I want to share an idea, people are really receptive to it because I have the capacity to tell a story and give an ask at the same time. And because I'm so versatile, I think that also helps me. Those experience helps tell my story, if that makes any sense. So every time I'm in a different area, different situation, working with this group or that group, all my experiences, that also helps me tell my story. And it just captures people, and it just blows up from there.
One thing I hear from what you're saying is that it gives people an opportunity to relate. Is that kind of what I'm getting? Can you tell me a little bit about that, or like give me an example of something like that?
So for example, I partner with Habitat because I'm a Habitat homeowner. So when I go out and I travel all over the world for Habitat or work with their clients, it's just not I'm a paid chef to come out and cook. I'm actually a Habitat for Humanity homeowner. I was actually living, in an urban environment. I've been on food stamps, so I can go to boot camp and I can talk about what that situation feels like. I can go out and talk to veterans because I've actually been boots on ground. So very much relatable. All that experience helps tell my story. So I think relatability is a big factor for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I'm going to come back. I want to move on to Kandia for a minute here. Kandia, so first of all, like I said, I was reading about all of you, and I found myself on Kandia's website. Can you remind us what the web address is, the URL?
Hey everyone, the web address is kandiajohnson.com.
kandiajohnson.com. So I was hanging out at kandiajohnson.com yesterday, and I came across this amazing video that you did about Motivational Monday. And all of you need to go and watch this video. It's like 2 minutes, and it's fantastic. And there was one phrase that really stuck out to me in that 2 minutes, and that was, certainty is the enemy of growth. And I thought that was just hearing those words just made such an impact on me, because I feel like so many of us are so fearful of change, and it holds us back. So I want to hear a little bit about that from you first, and then I have another question for you.
Okay, sure. So first off, thanks for watching that video. Second off, that quote is inspired by a book by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a You Know What, y'all. I highly recommend that book. Even if you think about where we are today in the world, everything is uncertain right now. But the reality is everything was always very uncertain. And a lot of the times we hold ourselves back from taking a step in life because we want to know with absolute certainty that you are going to succeed. And the reality is there's no absolute certainty in anything that you can do. You can't control the outcome. You can only control your effort. And so once you find the courage to lean into that effort, once you find the courage to lean into that curiosity, the world opens up for you in a different way. I believe it's just embracing the fact that nothing is certain. Nothing is.
That is definitely the truth. And if there was ever a time that those words ring truer, it is these last few months, for sure. So you work with a lot of chefs. You work with them on pitching, on getting their ideas out there with, I'm just curious, like, what is your experience of like storytelling and how that really makes an impact in their work?
So for many years, I worked as a communication and learning consultant. And so for different management consultant firms. So when a firm or a company or an organization wanted to get the word out about a new product, service, or initiative, they would contact your girl. So in a sense, it really wasn't about what the product could do or what the service could do. It was about the transformation that that product, service, or initiative could bring. It was about how it could make someone's life easier, right? Or it was about the benefits that that person could experience every single day. And it was also about, when you think about how it could make your life easier, you think about the emotions that comes with making your life easier. And stories in itself are rooted in emotions. So when you think about every single day we make decisions, those decisions 9 times out of 10 are influenced by our emotions. Even your decision to participate in this webinar today, your decision to, eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, your decision to choose a certain career path, that's all rooted in an emotion. And stories, again, are rooted in emotions.
Can you tell me a little bit about an experience that you had with a chef or a client where exactly what you're talking about, sharing the story that leads to the emotions, or maybe it's the other way around, has made an impact?
So I have to give a shout out to one of my faves, Chef L. Simone. So I think about, yeah, she has a new podcast out, by the way. So I love to plug my people. But so when Chef L and I right now are friends, but initially we had a client relationship. And so her frustration in the industry was about the lack of opportunity and the lack of presence for women of color. And so setting herself apart was about creating a story around the opportunities that are not available in terms of visibility, in terms of networking, in terms of mentorship and support that are not available for women of color. So she decided to let that frustration fuel her into starting She Chef. That's her organization. And with that came the many stories around the fact that, women of color are often underestimated in the kitchen. And so telling stories that not only reflect her own experience, but also the other women that she was working with was rooted in just everyday kind of occurrences that they would experience, whether it was in front of the house or in back of the house. And so really getting clear on the challenges, the frustrations, the fact that we're often underestimated, we don't have that mentorship and support, telling stories around those types of things that are happening every single day taps into the emotion. It helps you feel connected, like this person actually gets me. This is my experience. And so I would definitely say, in working with her, it helped me see the power of your story, and it helped build a community of a whole other group of amazing women who also had stories to share.
Yeah, I want to say, and please, any of the other panelists, if you want to chime in around this, one of the things I also feel is that it works both ways, like what you're saying and what Chef Ro was saying about folks relating to you and being like, yeah, that's my experience too, and therefore making an impact in that way. But it also, what I experience a lot of times is people who are more a part of the hegemony, whether that's, cis white women, men, etc., that all of a sudden, when I say something like, oh, people treat me this way or treat me that way, they're like, oh, no, oh, that doesn't happen to you. Like, whatever, like I go to the bathroom at the airport and women give me a hard time and people, that couldn't possibly happen to you. Yes, it does. And so I think it's really important for people to also, who are not people of color, women of color, etc., to understand what the experience is. And sometimes by just saying sort of the facts, like if Chef L's just like, these are the statistics around women of color chefs in leadership positions, etc., it kind of is just like, okay, here's some facts and figures. But when you share those stories of like, this is what happened to me on this job, this is what happened this interview, and they see your full self of like how brilliant and amazing you are, and they're just like, what? How is this possible? I think it also helps folks that don't have those same types of experiences kind of like awaken to it or see it more clearly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. One of the things that I live by is people buy into people, not facts. Really, when you think about it, even if you think about the energy that you give off, people buy into the energy of your presence even before they buy into the power of your words. That's all a part of your story. So, you know, talking about the facts are cool, but when you start, even when you think about, you know, the coronavirus and everything that's going on, when you start hearing the stories of people who look like you, or moms and dads or aunts and uncles, it becomes real. And that's because people, again, people buy into people before they even sometimes buy into the facts of the situation.
Yeah. I love that. People buy into people. That is very true. Does anyone else, Ro, Dawn, Janina, you have anything to share on that?
I think what Kandia is saying is totally accurate. People do buy into people. There's always a story behind every human being. If you're breathing and you're alive, you have a story to tell. And the best way to communicate to another person or group of people, whether it's professionally or personally, is to tell your story. You know, even if it changes, even if you're not sure of who and what you are, you must have a story. You know, dig into your past, you know, your DNA, good and bad, put it together. It'll change as you grow up and as you mature professionally and personally, but that has to come through. That is your winner right there.
Agreed. Anyone else? I wanted to also say, like, I think that, and Kandia, Dawn, Janina, you might run into this a bit, where people, you know, when Dawn, you say like everyone has a story, that some people get all like, oh, well, nobody wants to hear my story. Like they don't want to hear. And I think it's important to empower people. Is there, you know, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from either of you.
Sure. So that's interesting. The whole, you know, people now thinking people don't want to hear who you are. It's kind of true. I'll give you a personal experience as with my singer hat on. So I'm a classically trained soprano, and you know, when I got out of school, I was like, okay, I'm gonna sing opera and everything, and I did my audition thing. I moved to New York to sing, and I was getting ready for a gig, a recital, and I said, you know what, I want to put some other rep in my, you know, in my library. So let me go to the library and do some research. I went to the reference section at Lincoln Center Library, and I came across a book that included this guy who had his own private library of everything that had to do with the African diaspora, music, literature, whatever. So I came across a composer from Nigeria. I'm from Liberia, West Africa, right? And so I thought, oh, how intriguing. I didn't learn about him in school. So I sent him my press kit, you know, sent him like a recording of me singing, stuff that I had done so far. And it pretty much changed my life. What I realized at a deeper level was, you know, like how you crave stuff from your childhood or stuff that you want to eat and taste. I was craving something. I was craving whatever it is that I lost when I left my country and moved here as a very young child. It was a craving, and it became a part of my story as a singer. And so since then, I have performed music by African composers along with what we would call standard rap, you know. And when I forayed into the culinary space, I realized that I could relate to chefs as other creatives. They were telling their story, you know, with their culinary skills. And through that, I was able to connect very strongly in that space and juggle both.
Yeah.
So it's really important, like I'm saying, and what Kandia is saying too, to continuously build on who you are and what you are into whatever career or careers, in my case, that you have.
Yeah. Don, thank you so much for sharing that story, and Preeti for digging deeper into that question. I tend to see that the statement of like, nobody wants to hear my story typically comes from a deep sense of imposter syndrome. And what I'd say about imposter syndrome too is that, let's see, it's not equal. Women, non-binary individuals, people of color suffer from imposter syndrome at higher rates. So I think it's, you know, I don't have the silver bullet for how you'd overcome imposter syndrome because I'm not sure I've even done it. But I can say that recognizing that it's there is kind of step one in overcoming this illusion that your story doesn't matter, cough, cough, that you don't belong, because typically quite the opposite is true.
Yeah.
And I
Those
would
were in
add,
my notes, actually. This imposter syndrome. I think you live with it your entire life and every day. And the older you get, the stronger you get, the more secure you get in what you're doing and how you're living your life, the more you can combat it. But sometimes it, you know, it keeps you in bed. I mean, it's real.
And I always like to remind people too that Maya Angelou once said that she published 11 books. And even after she published 11 books, she still felt like a fraud. She still felt like someone was going to find out that she was a fraud. So when I think about imposter syndrome, it definitely doesn't feel good. I deal with it every day, but I also remember that short little story that she told to remind me that you work through it. And essentially, it just becomes almost, I tell people to think of it as your GPS to where you need to grow in life. When that feeling starts to creep in, that means you're about to level up. That means it's time to that next level. And so we have to appreciate the good with a little bit of the bad feeling and be able to move forward.
Absolutely.
I feel like for me, can you guys hear me? Because I can't unmute myself on the computer. So I'm on the phone now. Okay. I feel like for me as a veteran, I was never able to tell my story in the military. So when I got out, I didn't care if you wanted to hear it or not. I kind of took that stance. I kind of jumped at it, and I told people who I was through my plating, through my food, through my experience, and I feel like I forced people to listen because that's a part of breaking the glass ceiling. Especially as a mentor, I want young women to be able to tell their story no matter what. So I think for me, it doesn't matter if you want to hear it or not because that's a part of who I am.
thank you, all of you. That was amazing. I want to say a really funny thing, which is that in my imposter syndrome, I like spend so much, you know, I went to culinary school, I worked at all these restaurants, I'm always like, I'm not like, I still feel uncomfortable with the term chef. And at one point, my wife was like, you had 2 James Beard nominations. Would you just be cool with that? I was like, okay. But there's still, you know, you're all right. It still continues. There's still moments where I'm like, am I really like, you know, is this something I can do? Like, I don't know. And so I think, and it is exactly what you said, Kandia. It's that moment where you feel that uncomfortability, where you feel that challenge coming in, that you need to step up to that, and, you know, and rise up to it.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to have friends who are competitors to a certain degree, you know, in your life, who are friendly competitors, you know, and you kind of figure that out as you kind of, you know, bounce around. And to also have mentors who are not going to compete with you. That's really important. I think it's in particular for women and POCs. You know, you want somebody who will support you, who's kind of been there already, or maybe been there in a different way, and can be under you, you know, supporting you is what I mean, the entire way. Because we have so many, I think, more barriers to manage. It's really important. And also pay attention to what other chefs or, you know, people in the culinary space are doing. I mean, it can be very inspirational. And also people outside of your particular industry, you know?
Yes, Don, I think that's so great. I think one thing about that is also the stories, like the storytelling, because I think that especially as women of color, like there's so many experiences that we have where you're just like, am I crazy? Or is this like happening? And, I think about, I sort of informally mentor a number of women of color chefs. Someone who's always been there for me has been Chef Tanya Holland. She's a good friend of mine.
Wonderful.
And, just being able to go to her and say, this is what's happening, and I think this is what this means, and have it be validated, and have those stories, and be able to hear from her, these are some things that happened to me, and actually relate to that of like, okay, I'm not totally crazy, or I'm not like making this up. This is really what's happening in whatever, challenging situation. So
Sure.
mentorship, yeah, is very important. I want to ask Janina a question. This is such a great conversation.
It's juicy. Hit me with it.
Janina, so you work with really big companies and large advertising. How do you see storytelling, just like, what are the advantages of storytelling in that sort of framework?
Yeah, the advantage of storytelling goes back to the point that we've been hitting, which is emotion. I mean, this is a very listen to the scientists point in time. So let me listen to the marketing scientists who say that emotional campaigns work exponentially better than rational ones. So giving people that emotion, and by works, I mean, it changes minds, it changes behaviors. In the case of brands, it generates sales. In the case of advocacy, it generates results. So emotion works, is what I would say. I think the under-recognized point in these conversations is that emotion seems intuitive, but can be hard work, right? Like for people and for brands, it takes deep introspection and personal exploration and talking it out over long dinners with friends to figure out what that central emotion is, and then being able to kind of capture it, recognize it, and express it in everything that you do and say. And that's why I have a job, I guess, is because it's hard work to identify what that emotion is. And it's just as important to express it to the world once it's identified.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that experience is like when you're working with someone who, you're really trying to pull that out of them?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like a ghost on this Zoom, like just without a face, speaking about existential questions in identifying emotion. But it is that, like, it's a very existential process. I like to say that in my work, I'm sometimes, part strategist, part kind of bootleg therapist, because it is a lot of just like delving deep into questions like, if I or my brand were to disappear tomorrow, what would the world miss? Right. If I'm celebrating my brand or my product or my effort's birthday 10 years from now, and I'm blowing out the candles and I look around the room, who's standing there? What's written on the cake? What am I even celebrating? Oftentimes, especially for brands, there's this sense of like the world is happening to you. So consumers gravitated towards a certain project or a message really stuck, and then the world defined you instead of you really understanding what you as your brand, or again, as you as a person, what your core purpose from the outset was. So it's a lot of strategic reflection, a lot of looking, someone mentioned DNA before, a lot of unpacking what those component parts are. And then bringing it to light and establishing a set of actions that can determine what you do once you've identified that core.
One thing I kind of hear in there is consistently trying to center a person or experience or a brand. Is that what I'm
for sure.
That's really important to all of us in all of our work. I think about different times in my life where I've had a lot of failures, and the one thing I always do is try to remember like why I decided to become a chef to begin with. Because I think that what I hear from what you're saying is that a lot of times, we have a certain amount of success, and then that, you know, all these characters come out and they're like pulling you in all these different directions, telling you you should do that, come over here, help us with this. And then other people start talking to you like, oh, you should be doing that. Like, this is what's what, and this is what you should be trying to achieve. And then when it's all good when everything's good, but the moment you have, you know, a challenge, you sort of feel lost because you're like, wait, did I just spend all this time, you know, trying to get a James Beard Award instead of just focusing on what I'm trying to do, which is like cook beautiful food, bring people together, nourish my community. And that we all have to just like, you know, because I think that happens in every industry, is that because there's this sort of prevailing idea of what success looks like, and it becomes very, you know, this one thing, whatever that is. If you're a lawyer, it's like, oh, you got to be partner. If you're a chef, it's like, you got to be executive chef. You got to be, you know, win those awards, whatever, be in those magazines. And in all of those things, we lose sight of what our real experience is. Does that kind of hit something for you, Janina?
Yeah, I call it step one, know your why, WHY, right? Like, know your purpose, know your values. And I always like to say, like, it's not a novel. It's like a one sentence, right? Like, if you had to, you could write it on a t-shirt and wear it around your house. Like, it is a very clear articulation of what you stand for.
And I think, you know, to that point, it's important to, yes, know your why, but also be open, even if you're not ready for it. Just be open to the fact that your whys may change. Your goal might not turn out the way that it is. And I think for a lot of women in particular, you know, we're not so kind to ourselves. And so you end up using that goal to a certain degree as punishment if you don't get there at a particular time or in the way that you had envisioned. I mean, being sort of one-track minded is good and strong, but I think being a little bit more like water is also, actually it's stronger in a way. Everybody won't necessarily get that TV deal. Everybody won't necessarily be an executive chef. So what? There are so many ways to exist in this world. And I think part of, you know, creating your brand is being ready to be a little malleable in terms of what the end result is. So not being married to the goal, as my sister would tell me.
I totally agree. I believe that we all should be very intentional about making time to pause.
That's right.
Pause. Shut off the world for a second and keep it real with yourself, and give yourself permission to change your mind. A lot of the reasons why we don't sometimes share our story is because we're too afraid to change our mind, to say to the world, our parents, our caretakers, whoever they are, that, okay, I said that last week, but I'm a new person now. I'm saying this week. It's okay to change your mind. So I always ask people to make time, schedule time in your life to pause. Sometimes a pause is 5 seconds, and sometimes it's 5 days or 50 days. Take a break and pause and take a few deep breaths and ask yourself some questions about who you are and how you want to show up in the world and why this matters to you.
Yeah, I think especially now, as some of us are working from home, we're isolated more, probably more emotionally charged, not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, you know, that's real. You have to be able to stop, eat some ice cream and cake, which is what I plan to do after this.
Yes. A very good friend of mine is calling this whole situation that we're all in the great pause. That's what she refers to it as, which I think is just, it's so true to what you both just said, Kandia and Dawn. And I know that for myself as a chef who made the decision and closed 2 restaurants, you know, one which really I had a hard time extrapolating my own personal identity from that restaurant. And who am I if I'm not the chef and owner of this restaurant? If this restaurant doesn't exist, who am I? But that was 2 years ago, and for me, it's that is part of the exactly what the two of you were talking about. It's like taking that time to say, okay, maybe this isn't the goal, and maybe I've achieved part of it, and that's cool. And I need to take a break and figure out what's the next thing and get to that why that Janina's talking about.
I just want to say thank you, ladies, for saying that, because I've been a victim myself of people not accepting me changing my mind. So you also have to be fearless and allow yourself to do just that. I've had so many people tell me you can't do everything all at once. You have to stick to one route. So thank you, ladies, for discussing this, because like I said, I think people should be fearless and step into that, because it's not something that should be seen negatively. And I have struggled with that as a chef myself. People are like, you're Black, you cook African diaspora. You're Black, you cook Southern food. You're Black, you're a woman. I've actually had a chef give me an opportunity to run his restaurant because I was a Black woman. And he said, well, I'm a white man. If I cook Southern cuisine, nobody's going to buy it. So just being able to break out of that and being like, do I want to cook this food because they say I have to, or can I cook this food, or can I do catering? Can I do country clubs? Can I be a teacher? So I've been a victim of having people kind of create my own story for me. So thank you, ladies, for discussing that.
That's pretty heavy.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying it.
Speaking of which, Dawn, I want to ask you, you spent a long time working with chefs on these amazing events. Just hearing what Chef Rose saying and thinking about storytelling and how it impacts this work and your work, what do you see has been the impact in that environment?
It's been very interesting. Without totally aging myself, it's been an interesting experience for me to see how the terrain has changed and how the environment has changed. There are a lot more women, a lot more people of color in the spotlight. Not enough, obviously, but more of a diversity in terms of the culinary world. When I started out, I was working for this lady named Melanie Young in New York. And she worked on a lot of different events. But at that time, there were very few Black women that I knew of anyway who were in the space. My friend and colleague Valerie Wilson, for example, who's a publicist, we worked together on the Beard Awards many, many moons ago. There were these two amazing producers. They're still producing shows for various networks and cable programs, Rochelle Brown and Sonia Armstead from Powerhouse Productions. You know, these are like people that were there before a lot of other people were there. And also just over the years working at Karlitz, for example, where we are marketers, and so by nature facilitators of storytelling for our clients. You know, we create the content, and a lot of the content is culinary. I have had the wonderful fortune of working on an event such as Harlem Eat Up, right, which is an annual festival. And that has really, along with one other project I can think of, allowed me anyway to work even closely with chefs who are creative people, as I say, and help tell the story to make a bigger story. Does that make sense what I'm saying? If each chef is telling his or her story, then you have this amazing novel, as it were, of one big story that you can focus based on the particular, situation. I find that more and more as the industry sees more people that look like us, chefs are getting more in the spotlight. And one of the important things for people like myself and Kandia and others like us is to make sure that with the chefs that we're working with, the standard, white male chefs, or to a certain degree, white women chefs, is to bring in our people to make sure that the story is as diverse as possible. So that's, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but at least that's my role. My role is to be there to say, hey, there's, Chef X, but there's also Chefs A, B, and C. And their stories are as important to tell. And I guess what I'm seeing is that we now have this moment to make sure everybody gets a piece of that light and opportunity.
Yeah, I have a couple questions or thoughts about it. It's sort of like, one, when you're talking about Harlem Eat Up, as opposed to some of these other events that you did in the past, where it sounds like that story would be very similar when you just have, as you say, mostly white men and white women chefs, probably all cisgender. And when you open that up and there's opportunities for more chefs of color to be at the table, or be a part of something, that you also find that you have to kind of work with some, because one thing I know is like, there was a time, I date myself a little bit, I started cooking in restaurants in 2002. And I wasn't a teenager. I was in my 20s.
I was 5.
There's part of like being in that environment. I remember my early days, I was in London, and you're in this very different world, and you're the only person who looks like you, and wanting to just kind of be like, okay, I'm just over here, like being afraid to share your full self, being afraid to kind of be like, hey, this is me. So do you find sometimes it's difficult when you have chefs who've kind of been that way and grown up that way for so long? Like I find it with some cooks where if they've been in a lot of fine dining, they're like afraid of flavor. And I'm like, this needs more, like, a little more acid, give it more salt, give it a little more spice. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, isn't that how like you would eat it at home? And they're like, I've just been, toning it down. And it's like, no, be your full self. Do you find that that's a challenge sometimes to get like chefs of color, folks of color, that feel like somehow they get kind of trapped in this box, and they've somehow been told for so long that they need to stay in that box?
Not with this particular venture. No, I actually have found that having that opportunity to work on Eat Up has been very inspirational, because indeed people are, the chefs and the restaurateurs and other smaller business owners, they're pretty fearless. It's like, I'll put it this way. I remember when I went back, and I'm going to make this a little personal if you don't mind. I remember when I went to Liberia, which is where I'm from, some years ago, and a friend of mine was like, how did you feel when you were there? And I said, I felt for the first time in many years that I was fully in my skin. And I feel that way when I'm not from Harlem, right? I didn't grow up in Harlem, but I felt that way for many years when I went to Harlem. I was in my skin. I was accepted automatically. And I found that a lot of my, culinary colleagues there are fully in their skin and they're doing their thing. Even some of the younger businesses that are starting. So that's pretty cool. What I have found is that for maybe some younger chefs or other people in the culinary space who are maybe out of their particular environment, maybe at a gig, for example, that we might have put together that they're not used to being in, some maybe extra push is required. But I find that most people are comfortable with, putting in their spices and putting in whatever it is that makes them themselves. That's been my experience, which is great.
Yeah, and I always think I feel like all the things that I got made fun of as a kid, when I was a kid, I always thought this is terrible. But I knew in the back of my head that when I grew up, those were the things that were going to make me interesting and different in a good way, because I had these experiences, because I wasn't like all the other kids. And I think that informs a lot of, artists, chefs, authors, etc. in their work. Do you feel that way, Ro?
Absolutely. I think adversity makes you who you are. So like I said, like being a Black female chef, a veteran, I'm automatically put in this box. I'm automatically, like I said, always put in this sense of you have to cook a certain way. And, I haven't clinged to any food identity. Why? That's kind of the trip that I'm on right now. Why do I have to, like, people, you guys know I've been on TV a few times, and it's always like, what's your favorite dish? I don't know. Like Dawn said, it changes. Like 2 years ago, this was my signature. Next month, it could be completely different. Last week, it was something different. So I'm constantly changing. But the adversity kind of tells the story. The adversity helps me grow and be stronger than I was before. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I want to say, especially in this time for many of us, take your space. Take it. You freaking deserve it. Take all of it. I'm telling you. Put that spotlight on yourself, honey, and shine it as brightly as possible, even if you feel insecure walking through the door. Do it.
And I would like to say too that when it comes to your story, sometimes your story isn't that warm, fuzzy, feel good thing. Sometimes it's that thing that pisses you off. Sometimes it's the thing that's being underestimated or overlooked in the industry. Lead with that, right? So a lot of the times what stops us is because we want it to be pretty and packaged and in a bow. And the reality is it could be that story, that thing in the industry, that issue, that technique, that person that's overlooked. That's your story for this year, right? Or maybe for 2 years, or for maybe it's 6 months. But give yourself permission to embrace the fact that you are made up of different stories. And for this moment, it may be the story that's ticking you off that you're experiencing either, in culinary networking events or in the kitchen. And that's the story that you are going to commit to for the entire year. And that's okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I really, I know we're running out of time, and I feel like Dawn and Kandia, you started answering this question, but I have one last question for Dawn, Kandia, and Janina in the last 4 minutes that we have. And that is like, do you just have, I was going to say 3, but 1 to 3, just like tips, and you started going there on intentional messaging, just to bring it back to sort of brass tacks, a few tips.
So I would say, in addition to the other things that I would say, 1, be clear about your audience and what matters to them. Because again, you're made up of different stories, but based on who you're talking to, you may have to adapt that story to meet the needs of the person you are trying to help or the person you are trying to guide in a different direction. And then the second tip is practice your story to own it. Even if you don't have a public speaking event lined up or a job interview lined up, one of my favorite ways to practice my story is by using the audio to text feature. It's an app on my phone. And so I will practice like introducing myself. I'll practice speaking at an event, and then I email it to myself and I eliminate all of the fluff and the things that I really don't want to say. And then I record myself again. So practice your story to own it and give yourself permission that it's going to change next year. It's okay.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Dawn?
I would say very similar to what Kandia was saying. Yes, practice. As someone who works in marketing and production and as a singer, you have got to do your work, do your technical work. If you're a chef, you've got to work those skills, feed your family, feed your friends, let them give you critique, hone your skills. And when it's time, when an opportunity shows up, even if you don't think you're completely ready, show up for it. You have no idea where it will lead you. Do it. And tell your story, as Kandia was saying, know your audience, but tell your story from the kitchen to your plate. If you want to do, haute French cuisine, Italian, Moroccan, whatever it is you want to do it. And always support other people. Make sure you're bringing somebody else along with you, because let me tell you, you have no idea. I had a voice teacher that said, be good to everybody on the way up, because what goes up comes down. And when you're coming down, those same people will meet you.
That is such great advice.
And get paid. Get
paid. Janina, do you have some?
I think everyone has the right to change their mind, and I think that was a great kind of segment of our conversation that we had. What I will add, however, is see whether you're changing your mind kind of purposefully, or if you're just like bored of hearing yourself, because I have noticed in my personal experience and in my profession that people will not repeat a point often enough, right? Like they're like, I said it once and like, that's it, I'm bored of it. And it's like, it is so important to repeat your point, repeat yourself, stick to your core message, speak your truth often and loudly, because it takes someone hearing it not once, not twice, but often 3 times for a point to really sink in. So don't be afraid of repetition. In fact, embrace it.
Thank you so much. I feel like I want to go back and watch this after the recording comes out, because I just feel like there's so many great points that all of you have brought up. And there's so many great like mantras. I want like t-shirts and coffee mugs made with like all of the things that the 4 of you have been saying over the last hour. So thank you all so much. It's been so great speaking with you today. And I'm going to pass it back over to Ashley to close us out.
All right, I just had to unmute myself and turn my camera back on. So this was such a great conversation that we didn't totally have time for questions. So if you did write them in, we'll respond to you. But it was just such an amazing conversation that Chef Preeti was moderating that we didn't want to stop it. But thank you. I can only reiterate, Chef Preeti, thank you. Janina, Lagemann-Doné, Kandia Johnson, Don Padmore, Chef Roshara Sanders, and of course, thank you, Chef Preeti Mistry, for moderating this conversation. Again, it will be available on the James Beard Foundation website, probably by tomorrow afternoon, and that's the James Beard Industry Support Webinars. And we have more webinars coming to you next week, including one next Thursday that's going to be kind of taking some of the things that we discussed about today during this webinar, and then talking about ways to use those on virtual platforms. So kind of how social media becomes part of this message, because it's kind of a unique space that a lot of people are using right now. So we hope to see you next week, and thank you for joining us. And of course, go to jamesbeard.org/open4good or check out our industry support webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.